What if the most fascinating films of the 1960s flopped not because they were bad, but because the world wasn't ready? These weren't quiet misses. Think studio meltdowns, directors fired mid-shoot, stars at war, and one movie so costly it nearly wiped out a Hollywood titan. Behind the chaos were bold visions that crashed hard, but left behind something unforgettable. Stick around. The real story isn't how they failed. It's why they still matter. Dr. Dolittle, 1967. Imagine spending more money than almost any film in history just to make talking animals sing about Push Me Pulleus. That's Dr. Dolittle. 20th Century Fox's second guess after Cleopatra and, somehow, almost as disastrous. Fresh off nearly collapsing from Elizabeth Taylor's Egyptian epic, Fox doubled down on spectacle, pouring $17 million into a musical about a kind-hearted vet who chats with creatures. Rex Harrison, fresh from My Fair Lady, signed on. But the production quickly spiraled into absurdity. Filming in Spain? Great idea until floods destroyed sets. Animals refused to cooperate, and locals protested the crew's presence. One llama reportedly bit a producer. Twice. The script kept changing. Songwriters came and went. At one point, the studio considered cutting all the musical numbers, then added them back last minute. Critics savaged it for being bloated, tone-deaf, and weirdly out of step with the late 60s mood. Audiences agreed. It earned barely half its budget back, deepening Fox's financial hole so badly that executives started selling off real estate. Yes. Again, to stay afloat. Yet, here's the twist. Kids loved it. On repeat viewings, its charm, colorful sets, and genuine warmth started to shine. Today, it's a nostalgic favorite, even if it once symbolized Hollywood's reckless ambition. So, was it a failure, or just a film born in the wrong decade? Either way, it's a cautionary tale wrapped in a polka dot coat and one of the most expensive musical misfires ever made. The Secret Life of an American Wife, 1968. What happens when a studio tries to chase the swinging 60s vibe but forgets to bring the fun? You get The Secret Life of an American Wife, a film so awkward it practically apologizes for existing. Starring Walter Matthau, yes, the grumpy guy from The Odd Couple as a politician whose wife, played by Ann Jackson, starts daydreaming about a younger man after reading a racy magazine article. Sounds tame now, but back then, Fox thought they had a spicy, modern comedy on their hands. They didn't. The script bounced between satire, farce, and something uncomfortably close to a public service announcement. Matthau, brilliant in dramatic and comedic roles, looked lost in polyester suits, muttering lines about modern marriage like he'd rather be anywhere else. Director George Axelrod, known for sharp wit in The 7-Year Itch, seemed unsure whether to wink at the audience or lecture them. Test screenings bombed. Critics called it embarrassing and confused. Fox quietly dumped it into theaters with zero fanfare, and it vanished within weeks, losing millions. But here's the strange part. The film actually has moments of quiet honesty about loneliness and midlife restlessness, ideas far ahead of their time. It just buried them under bad pacing and forced humor. Today, it's a curious time capsule, a film that tried to be bold but tripped over its own shoelaces. Forgotten? Absolutely. Worth revisiting, maybe if only to see Matthau look deeply uncomfortable while discussing youth culture in a wood-paneled den. Cleopatra, 1963. This is the one that almost killed a studio, not metaphorically, literally. Cleopatra didn't just flop, it detonated like a financial bomb under 20th Century Fox, shaking Hollywood to its core. Originally budgeted at $2 million, it ballooned past $40 million, equivalent to over $400 million today. Elizabeth Taylor, already the biggest star on the planet, was paid a record-breaking $1 million just to show up. But showing up turned into months of delays when she fell seriously ill, forcing the entire London shoot to shut down. The studio panicked. They moved the whole production to Rome, rebuilt colossal sets from scratch, and hired a new director, Joseph L. Mankiewicz, who shot so much footage they considered splitting it into 2 films instead. They released a 4-hour epic that felt like 3 different movies stitched together. And then came the real scandal. Taylor and Richard Burton began a very public romance on set, turning the film into tabloid fodder worldwide. The gossip overshadowed the story, the spectacle, even the historical drama. Yet here's the irony. Cleopatra was the highest-grossing film of 1963 in the U.S. It just wasn't enough. Fox lost nearly $40 million, sold off its backlot, now the site of Century City, and only survived because The Sound of Music rescued them 2 years later. So, was it a flop? Technically, yes, but it's also a monument to excess, ambition, and the moment old Hollywood realized it couldn't control everything anymore. Love it or hate it, Cleopatra changed the game and nearly ended it for one of the biggest studios in the world. Reflections in a Golden Eye, 1967. Marlon Brando, Elizabeth Taylor, John Huston. On paper, Reflections in a Golden Eye should have been unstoppable. Instead, it became one of the strangest, most unsettling misfires of the decade, a psychological time bomb disguised as prestige drama. Based on Carson McCullers' novel, it follows an army major in the Deep South, consumed by repression, voyeurism, and self-loathing. Brando plays him with eerie restraint. Taylor seethes as his bitter wife, and a young Robert Forster quietly watches it all unravel. But the real trouble began before cameras rolled. Montgomery Clift was supposed to star until his sudden death left the production in limbo. Brando stepped in, rewrote his dialogue, and reportedly clashed with Huston over everything from accents to camera angles. Huston's artistic choice to tint the entire film, gold literally bathing every frame in amber haze, turned critics off immediately. Viewers couldn't tell if it was a printing error or a metaphor. It was both and neither. When Reflections hit theaters, audiences expecting steamy Southern melodrama got a slow-burn study of shame and desire that made everyone uncomfortable. Warner Brothers panicked, releasing a standard color version that confused people even more. The box office tanked. Yet, decades later, film scholars see it differently. As one of the first mainstream movies to explore queer repression and military masculinity without flinching. Brando's performance, once mocked, now feels hauntingly modern. It failed spectacularly in its own time, but today, its strangeness looks like courage. Reflections in a Golden Eye didn't just flop. It dared to stare straight into the darkness most films still avoid. The Legend of Lylah, Clare, 1968. Hollywood loves making movies about itself, but rarely has one been this brutal, this self-loathing, or this utterly strange. The Legend of Lylah, Clare stars Kim Novak as a mysterious actress who may or may not be the reincarnation of a silent-era star who died under suspicious circumstances. Directed by Robert Aldrich, the same man behind Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. This film dives headfirst into the industry's obsession with image, fame, and the ghosts of its past. But the real drama happened off-screen. Aldrich clashed with the studio, over tone, pacing, and Novak's performance. She, still reeling from years of typecasting, gave a deliberately icy, detached portrayal that confused test audiences. The script veered from satire to psychological thriller to campy melodrama, often within the same scene. One infamous sequence features a director literally barking orders like a drill sergeant while wearing a tuxedo. MGM had high hopes, banking on Novak's name and Aldrich's reputation. Instead, the film bombed hard, earning less than $200,000 against a $1 million budget. Critics called it pretentious and incoherent. Aldrich later admitted it was a career misstep, yet decades later. Fans have rediscovered its weird power. The film's critique of Hollywood's machinery feels sharper now than ever, and Novak's haunting presence gliding through sound stages like a phantom gives it an eerie, timeless quality. It's not a perfect film, but it's a fascinating one, a mirror held up to an industry that rarely likes what it sees. Skidoo, 1968. What do you get when a legendary director known for hard-hitting dramas suddenly tries to make a groovy counterculture comedy? You get Skidoo, a film so desperately out of touch, it's like watching your grandpa attempt to rap. Otto Preminger, the man behind Anatomy of a Murder and Exodus, decided in 1968 that he needed to connect with the youth, so he hired Doris Day's ex-husband to write a script about hippies, mobsters, and government paranoia, and somehow convinced Groucho Marx to play a crime boss named God. Yes, really. The plot? A retired hitman, played by Jackie Gleason, gets pulled back into the underworld when his daughter gets tangled up with radicals. There's LSD, wiretaps, a prison break, and a musical number where cast members sing Skidoo while floating in zero gravity. It sounds like a fever dream, and that's because it basically was. Preminger had no idea how young people actually talked or behaved. The script is littered with forced slang like boss and far out, delivered with the enthusiasm of someone reading a dictionary. Even the cast seemed confused. Peter Lawford, Carol Channing, and Frankie Avalon all show up, looking like they wandered in from different movies. Channing's big scene involves her tripping on acid and dancing through a kaleidoscopic nightmare, which Preminger shot in one unbroken take because he refused to edit real emotion. The problem? It's unintentionally hilarious. Critics tore it apart. Audiences stayed away. United Artists barely promoted it, and it vanished within weeks. Yet decades later, Skidoo has gained a strange kind of respect, not as good cinema, but as a time capsule of Hollywood's awkward, well-meaning attempt to stay relevant. It's a noble failure, a film made with sincerity but zero self-awareness, and honestly, that's kind of beautiful. The Party, 1968. Imagine a silent film made in the age of talkies but set at a Hollywood dinner party, and starring Peter Sellers as a bumbling Indian actor who accidentally crashes it. That's The Party. A near-wordless comedy that dared to be quiet in a decade of noise, directed by Blake Edwards, fresh off the Pink Panther series. This film strips away plot, dialogue, and even logic to focus on pure physical comedy. Sellers barely speaks. Instead, he stumbles through opulent rooms, knocks over priceless vases, and accidentally invents a new kind of dance called the Hrundi Bakshi Shuffle. But here's the twist. The studio hated it. United Artists expected another Pink Panther fast, snappy, full of zingers. What they got was a Jacques Tati-inspired meditation on awkwardness, social anxiety, and the absurdity of Hollywood excess. Test audiences were baffled. Where was the story? Why wasn't Sellers cracking jokes every 30 seconds? The studio shelved it for months, then dumped it into theaters with little fanfare. It made back just over half its budget and was quickly forgotten. Yet time has been kind. Without relying on punchlines or stereotypes, Sellers' character is clumsy, not caricatured. The Party creates humor through timing, space, and human error. A scene where Bakshi tries to fix a leaky faucet and floods the entire house is a masterclass in escalating chaos. Even the supporting cast, Claudine Longet, Natalia Borisova, and a very patient waiter play their roles with deadpan grace. Today, it's seen as ahead of its time, a minimalist comedy in an era of maximalism. It didn't need explosions or car chases, just one man, a tuxedo that's slightly too big, and the universal truth that we've all been the wrong person in the right room. The Chairman, 1969. Gregory Peck in a Cold War thriller set in communist China? Sounds intense, but The Chairman isn't just tense, it's tangled in so many layers of political caution and studio fear that it barely knows what it wants to be. Peck plays a Nobel Prize-winning scientist sent behind the Iron Curtain to retrieve a revolutionary enzyme that could solve world hunger. But, of course, nothing's that simple. He's followed, drugged, and forced to navigate a maze of double agents, secret police, and high-tech surveillance, all while wearing a suspiciously clean suit in the middle of rural China. The real problem? The film was made at a time when Hollywood barely understood Asia, let alone communist politics. To avoid offending anyone or getting banned, the script turned Chinese characters into vague, shadowy figures. The villains have no names, no motives, just stern faces and dark uniforms. Even the enzyme MacGuffin feels like a placeholder for something important. 20th Century Fox poured money into location shooting well, as much as they could without actually going to China. Most of it was filmed in Hong Kong and studio backlots, with fog machines and fake mountains creating a dreamlike, almost surreal version of the East. The result? A thriller with no real stakes, no clear enemy, and a hero who solves everything by trusting science. Critics called it dull and confused. Audiences agreed. It disappeared fast, losing millions. But here's the odd thing. The film's paranoia about technology and foreign control feels weirdly modern. And Peck, ever the gentleman, gives it his all even when the script hands him lines like, "The enzyme must not fall into the wrong hands." Today, it's a fascinating misfire, well-intentioned, visually striking, and utterly lost in its own caution. The Split, 1968. Before Heat. Before Reservoir Dogs. There was The Split, a gritty, low-key heist film that got lost in the shuffle of a very crowded year. Based on a novel by Richard Stark, a pen name for Donald Westlake. It follows a crew of ex-cons pulled together for one last big score, robbing an LA Coliseum game day cash drop. Sounds familiar? It should. But what sets The Split apart is its cast: Jim Brown, Gene Hackman, Donald Sutherland, and Ernest Borgnine, all playing morally gray characters who trust no one, not even each other. Jim Brown, fresh off his football career and early film roles, delivers a quiet, intense performance as the planner who just wants to disappear after the job. Hackman is already showing the nervous energy that would make him a star 2 years later in The French Connection. Sutherland, barely recognizable with a beard and sunglasses, plays a twitchy safecracker who might be working for the cops, but Embassy Pictures didn't know how to sell it. Was it a crime drama, a character study, a social commentary on race and loyalty? They marketed it like a standard action flick, but the film moves slowly, builds tension through silence, and ends not with a shootout, but betrayal and rain-soaked regret. Audiences expecting bullet-style chases were disappointed. It barely made back half its budget, yet The Split has aged like fine whiskey. Its realism, handheld camera work, and refusal to glamorize crime paved the way for the gritty 70s. Quentin Tarantino has cited it as an influence, and that final shot, Brown walking alone into the night, suitcase in hand, says more about loneliness than most films ever manage. It flopped in 1968, but it was speaking a language the world wasn't ready to hear. The Valley of Gwangi, 1969. Cowboys, dinosaurs, a circus, a lost valley, a Catholic priest who says, "God help us, it's a dinosaur." If that sounds like a pitch scribbled on a napkin after too much coffee, well, you're not wrong. The Valley of Gwangi is the brainchild of special effects legend Ray Harryhausen, the man who brought skeletons to life in Jason and the Argonauts. Here, he merges his love of stop-motion monsters with the dying genre of the Western, creating something truly one of a kind, a dinosaur-Western hybrid that's equal parts thrilling, silly, and oddly heartfelt, set in early 20th century Mexico. The story follows a rodeo rider, played by James Franciscus, who discovers a hidden valley where prehistoric creatures still roam. He captures a fierce Allosaurus named Gwangi and drags it back to town to put on display. But of course, the beast escapes during a chaotic circus performance, rampages through the streets, and ends up in a cathedral for a final showdown that feels like King Kong meets the good, the bad, and the ugly. Warner Brothers thought they had a hit. They didn't. By 1969, audiences were flocking to Easy Rider and Midnight Cowboy Raw, modern stories about real people. A film with cowboys lassoing dinosaurs felt like a relic. Critics called it juvenile and out of step. It lost money fast and was shelved for years. But Harryhausen's craftsmanship is undeniable. Every frame of Gwangi's movement, the twitch of its tail, the flare of its nostrils is filled with personality. And the film's heart lies in its belief in wonder. It's not trying to be cool or ironic. It just wants you to believe, for 90 minutes, that magic and monsters might still exist. Today, it's a beloved cult classic, a testament to imagination in an age that was quickly leaving it behind. The Assassination Bureau, 1969. Picture a secret society of professional killers who only accept contracts if they believe the target deserves to die. Now imagine that same group getting hired to assassinate themselves. That's the gloriously twisted premise of The Assassination Bureau, a late 60s action comedy that blends Victorian elegance with anarchic wit and somehow stars both Oliver Reed and Diana Rigg at the peak of their charm. Based on an unfinished novel by Jack London, the The film follows a bold young journalist, Rig, who infiltrates the Bureau to expose its hypocrisy. She challenges its leader, Ivan Dragomilov, Reed, to eliminate his own members, assuming they're all corrupt. What follows is a globe-trotting chase across Europe, filled with sword fights, train stunts, and dry British humor. It should have been a hit. It wasn't. Paramount Pictures didn't know what to do with it. Was it a satire, a period adventure, a feminist fable? They marketed it like a standard spy flick, but the film's tone, witty, playful, and oddly philosophical, was out of step with the gritty realism dominating 1969. Critics were mixed. Audiences stayed home. It vanished from theaters within weeks, losing a significant chunk of its budget. Yet, the Assassination Bureau has aged like fine brandy. Reed and Rig crackle with chemistry. She's sharp and fearless. He's roguishly principled, and the script, co-written by the Italian Job's Troy Kennedy Martin, is packed with clever dialogue and moral dilemmas disguised as banter. The action is inventive without being brutal. The costumes lavish without being stuffy. Today, it's a cult favorite among fans of intelligent, stylish cinema. It flopped because it refused to pick a lane. But that's also why it endures. It's too clever for action fans, too fun for drama lovers, and too British for Hollywood. And honestly, that's the best kind of movie. Chubasco, 1967. Most Hollywood films about young people in the 1960s were set in cities, campuses, or protest lines. Chubasco went the opposite direction. It dropped its teenage hero into the quiet, sun-baked world of a Mexican-American fishing village in Southern California, based on a novel by Frank Waters. The story follows a restless young man named Chubasco who dreams of escaping his small-town life, defying his strict father, and finding his own identity on the open sea. It sounds simple, and that's part of why it failed. Universal Pictures released it in the middle of a decade obsessed with revolution, rock music, and rebellion, but Chubasco offered something quieter: introspection, family tension, and the ache of growing up without fanfare. Christopher Jones, a rising star at the time, gives a natural, understated performance. But there are no car chases, no love triangles, no big speeches, just a boy learning that freedom comes with responsibility. Critics called it dull and overly earnest. Audiences expecting Rebel Without a Cause got something more like The Endless Summer with emotional weight. It made barely a ripple at the box office and was quickly forgotten. But in hindsight, Chubasco feels refreshingly honest. It captures a slice of American life rarely seen on screen: working-class Latino communities, generational divides, the dignity of labor without resorting to stereotypes or melodrama. The ocean scenes are beautifully shot. The score is gentle and haunting. And the ending offers no easy answers. It's not flashy. It's not loud. But sometimes, the most underrated films are the ones that whisper instead of shout. The Reavers, 1969. Steve McQueen was known for playing tough guys cool, silent, always in control. So when he signed on to the Reavers, a folksy, comedic coming-of-age tale set in early 20th century Mississippi, fans were confused based on William Faulkner's final novel. The film follows a young boy who gets swept up in a misadventure with his grandfather and the family's handyman. Played by McQueen in a rare, relaxed role, there's a stolen car, a trip to Memphis, a horse race, and a whole lot of Southern charm. Warner Brothers hoped it would be a heartwarming crowd-pleaser. Instead, it landed with a thud. Released in June of 1969, the same summer as Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and Midnight Cowboy, the Reavers felt like a relic from another era. Audiences wanted edge, not nostalgia. Critics called it sweet but slight. And McQueen's performance, though warm and surprisingly gentle, didn't match his action hero image. The film barely broke even. McQueen reportedly never spoke of it again. Yet, The Reavers has quietly gathered admirers over the decades. Its portrayal of childhood innocence, racial dynamics, handled with more nuance than most films of its time, and the bittersweet passage of time gives it a quiet power. Director Mark Rydell treats the material with respect, never tipping into sentimentality. And that final scene, where the grown narrator reflects on how that one summer shaped his life, lands with a grace few blockbusters ever achieve. It flopped because it arrived too late in a decade racing toward the future. But sometimes, looking back is exactly what we need. Candy, 1968. Based on a satirical novel that was basically Candide meets Playboy. Candy follows a wide-eyed young woman as she stumbles through a series of absurd encounters with philosophers, poets, doctors, and gurus, all played by legendary actors like Marlon Brando, Richard Burton, James Coburn, and John Huston. The premise? Everyone wants to enlighten her. But really, they just want to take advantage. Director Christian Marquand assembled a dream cast, but the result was chaotic. Brando showed up in a wig and fake nose, mumbling half his lines. Burton phoned in his performance between other projects. The script bounced between surreal comedy, social critique, and soft farce, never settling on a tone. MGM, hoping for another Tom Jones-style hit, got a messy, uneven oddity instead. Critics called it tasteless and pointless. Audiences were baffled. It bombed hard. Yet Candy has a strange, hypnotic energy. Its critique of hypocrisy, especially among the so-called wise, feels sharper now than in 1968. And Olin, in her film debut, brings a quiet dignity to a role that could have been pure caricature. It's not a great film, but it's a fascinating one, a kaleidoscope of 60s excess, celebrity indulgence, and the moment satire lost its bite. It flopped because it tried to say everything, and ended up saying nothing clearly. But sometimes, the mess tells the truest story. So there you have it. 15 flops that crashed hard but still shine in hindsight. They weren't just failures. They were bold, messy, unforgettable gambles. Seen any? Tell us which one shocked you most. Haven't? Pick one, you might uncover a hidden gem. And if you love Hollywood's wildest swings, hit subscribe. Because sometimes, the biggest risks leave the best stories.